transformed. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought I was in the wrong place. You know, if you've been to an African traditional, there's trash everywhere, you know, you just don't even see it. And or the place is chaos and all that stuff. And this place looked like, you know, it's just beautiful. There's no trash and the homes are clean. And it's like, I got them all back together. I said, well, so what did you do? I said, well, you know, we couldn't think of anything to do. We didn't have any money, and you know, we just couldn't think of anything to do. So we just went home and cleaned our houses, and you know, we felt better. So then we kind of cleaned the area outside the house, and we start thinking, well, you know, the soil. By the way, the average depth of topsoil in Kenya is 60 feet. In America, in the best area, it's about 2 feet. So it's good soil. And most of Africa that I've been in is like that. If you know, good network of irrigation, they could easily feed the world there. But anyway, so yeah, you know, and then we planted some crops, you know, little truck garden crops, and one of their suggestions, and they did it. And then we did this, and then we did that, and then our neighbors kind of started doing it. You know, it's like it became this community thing, and then it just spread. It was like an infection. It was in the whole community, you know. And so I was pretty jazzed about that. And I had gone actually to raise more money. I couldn't. I was, my credibility was gone by that time. So I just came back to apologize. I said, sorry guys, you know, I got to face up to this. I couldn't bring you any money. And one of the guys said, we don't need your money. We need to talk more about how this can work. And that community just was incredibly powerful in its change for the next year. And about a year later, I took a church team in, and they decided that they were ready for some funding. And that community failed within a year. So by that time, I had 3 or 4 other villages kind of working. But it wasn't working. In fact, what was amazing was the communities transformed. But my mission, I really wanted to just kind of have a simple focus on widows and orphans. Everything I'm doing is just, how can we take care of these kids so they don't end up in an institutional orphanage in Africa? Because kids need to be in a loving home. And let me tell you something. There's nothing worse, except maybe the human trafficking issue, which is the result of being in an orphanage, largely. There's nothing worse than ending up in an orphanage in Africa. You'd have to see what they're really like. You know, you get to see an American orphanage once in a while, but if you want to see a real African orphanage, where 99% of the kids are, you just need to go and find them, and they're really tough to see. So, I'm trying to keep the kids up there, but what happened with Village Care, with the 5 practices, is that in those 5 steps, which intentionally I designed sanitation, nutrition, health awareness would be better than health care, education, and economic security as the 5 elements of all healthy communities. It's also the least expensive thing you can do to the hardest thing to do. There's an energy curve to how you do this. When they began, and my theory was that those things are interlinked, and the reason that most programs in Africa don't work in one sense is because you'll find hundreds of programs, but there's the health people, and there's the water people, and if you go to one community, you will not find all 5 of those things being done in one place. And think about it, if your sanitation isn't good, what's your health look like? You know, if your sanitation and nutrition aren't good, your health is going to be poor, you're not going to be able to stay in school, and you're not going to be able to work. So that those things are really interdependent in a much more powerful way than we see here. Because we have that infrastructure underneath us. It still doesn't explain why it worked, but it explained kind of the mechanics of why it was so easy for them to start by cleaning their homes. It's still the most powerful thing we see. And then they'll build little hand washing stations. Disease will drop by 50% with just hand washing. So you have this incredible change. And interesting thing in that community, it's consistent with all of our communities. We have about 1,100 communities in 11 countries now. And we think we'll have about 2,000 by the end of the year. So the interesting thing is that my measurement has been with child mortality. Children technically from age birth to 5 years old, but I really like that whole up to about 10 years old. There's 2 different ways kids need to be treated. And child mortality rate in Namusi dropped to, it's typically in Africa would be 27 times higher than in the United States. In that village, it dropped to our level within about a year. It was amazing to me. Now, of course, we all say, oh God, it's overpopulated, but that's a contextual problem as well. Sub-Saharan Africa has 700 million people in it. It's twice the number of the United States, roughly 2.25 times more than we have. On 3 times the land area. It's not overpopulated, that's not the problem. The Blue Nile Basin alone, that's where I got airlifted out, but I went in there to survey 10 million square miles. It was also where the Darfur is, and I went in a bad week. It was the week John Green, who was the leader of the Southern Revolution, was killed that week. I was the only American in the Sudan. I was dumb enough to go. Yeah, it was an oops. But the Blue Nile Basin, the source of the Nile is Lake Victoria. It runs kind of this way and then this way up to Egypt. And flying in there's no roads. You had to have an airlift to get in and out, both. And you're looking down at the best farmland I've ever seen. Millions of square miles, and it's not a hut on it. It's completely unused. Some agribusiness corporations are starting to buy up that land now. But the calculations that I've been able to find from the United Nations since indicate that land alone in that strip would feed the entire world. So Africa doesn't have a food problem. And
so is it water in the irrigation, like you were saying?
No, that's all swampland. So that's not the problem. It's a political problem, and you'd have to go back a couple hundred years to see how all that evolves. And the book kind of walks through all this, by the way. Designed it so you could read it on a plane. It really just lays it out in a pretty logical order. This is what's happening. This is why it happened. This is where it started. It doesn't answer. There's no solutions in the book. I'm working on the second book. But I didn't want to. At first I didn't, because Americans are great for thinking they have the next best idea. And I really.
So you never bring in educators from America? All the
not
education
anymore.
is
I
done.
stopped at it.
Okay.
I'm sorry to take so much of your time here, but I'll try to stay focused on that, because it's a big story. And so going back to Namusi, we found the basic elements, but they weren't using what I identified is self-interest. They were taking care of themselves, but they still had 300 orphans in this community that nobody was taking care of. They just sort of find a place to sleep at night, or somebody would take them in, and their death rate is really high, and the abuse is incredibly high, and that's where a lot of the source is for all of the sex trafficking and things that you see. And they're not addressing that issue. When you're in a community as poor as some of those communities are, it's understandable that you might, man, this is great stuff. I'm fixing my home, And so I needed another element, and I had worked here in helping a friend with a nonprofit. It's called the Placer Institute of Comprehensive Community Outcomes, and he had written a program called Outcomes for Children, which was mandated by the courts in Placer County in the 80s or 90s. It was for the juvenile justice system, and it was designed because kids just get lost in the justice system, and if there's abuse, or they're taken out of a home or put into a foster home, or they're just bad kids or whatever, the medical system can't share about the legal stuff, and the legal people don't know about the medical issues, and it's a nightmare. And so a judge, my friend, and working with the judge here in Placer County, mandated that they design a program that would allow these organizations to integrate, that they would have to sign releases with each other, and they would share information with these goals in mind. And I saw him, and I thought, when he was writing his book, and I saw him, and I thought, God, this might work in Africa. He thought it was crazy, because it's like Placer County. It's one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. But he had 5 goals for children. I just loved it.